Okay, another journal. This one is from 826, and the Mayan day was 5 Lamont, which is star, rabbit, or Venus. Now go figure what those three have in common. I am suddenly filled with a quiet joy and a very strong desire to open this journal. Let's see what's behind this, for I do not know. For one thing, I'll be sharing a link to one of Grace Butler's playlists on YouTube, where she turns book 1 of Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East into an audiobook. I enjoy her work, so be sure to open the main written journal for that link. It's a precious one. As it turns out, this book will rejuvenate the faith of many Christians, for these Eastern masters actually taught their lessons in terms of Christianity. The books are really great, but perhaps I'll ad-lib about that when I record this. My heart is going elsewhere with me here. Perhaps the only way I have of sharing the perceived depth of the identity changes I am going through is to share that transiting Pluto sits and is parked precisely on my natal sun, and it retrogrades back and forth over that 9 degrees Capricorn. Now the sun in our chart represents our actual identity, as opposed to the ascendant, which is about how we present to the world, what people see when they look at us, not who we really are. When we add in the long-lasting square aspect of Uranus to Pluto, and other equally challenging things in my own chart, it's truly intense. With great depth of honesty, I can say I truly don't know who I am. And whoever I think it is, it's probably going out the window tomorrow. I'm having to find something deeper than identity on which to rely. It's a very strange ride. Just now, though, I am in the grip of a strange, heart-centric joy that is very uplifting. It is not like what I've been used to calling that divine joy with the capital J that I find ever present in heart. It's somehow quieter, smaller, yet more intense. Don't know what it's about, just that it's different from what I've encountered before. Yes, I am in process of losing everything. Now, I don't say that about possessions or things physical, but those things are transitory anyway. I mean, even the body is a transitory thing. They mean far less to me than the internal things I'm having to let go of. I just don't live that much on 3D. So my values have moved on with me into spiritual things, and I know many, many of us are this way. We've been this way in potential, if not openly, most of our lives. The interior things always meant more than anything tangible, so it's not so unusual. When I say I'm losing everything, I don't know if I can explain what is meant. I can say it's all very strange. This joy may be related to the great joy I've found, the renewal of what some may call faith, in listening to the audio book 1. And it's 1 of 5, but each one is self-contained. You can pick up any of them. Everything is more and more backwards. Apparently, it takes losing most or all of what we built our life and consciousness on to enter such joy. It just doesn't make logical sense. But having given up on logic some few years ago, anyway, that's not really a problem. Yet it continues to be rather strange and continually unexpected. Okay. Seems to me what I'm getting is that I was just told something. I was told it in heart, which means conscious mind doesn't have access, doesn't know what it is, yet it brings me such specific joy. This joy seems to be a pinpoint sort of thing. And no, I don't understand that either. Everything goes by a sort of sensing, more akin to feeling now. It's not your typical emotional stuff. Instead, it is heart-centered. Feels more refined, higher dimensional or something. I don't know. In leaving mind aside so much, preferring almost always to heart center instead, a whole new system of some sort seems to be activating in my biology. Now, that is purely a guess about what may be going on, folks. You can look to me for precious few facts going forward. I'm doing my best to swim in this new sea I seem to have jumped into or been dumped into. All is so strange. I guess I'm hoping that there will be at least a few of you who can echo something of the flavor of what's happening here. One thing that seems consistent is that we're coming into unity, so to take anything personally is likely to be a mistake. Nothing is personal anymore. Now, it probably never was, but we just pretty universally didn't know that. And while it might be nice to have more than just a clue about what's transpiring, both for me and for all of us, I'm at the point now where I just don't care about knowing anything. It will come when it needs to, and I know I have all I require at every point in time. I'm never lacking anything. Now, this too is quite strange, but that's how it's working. And this too may have always been the case. It likely was. Another of those things we weren't ready to see yet, so we didn't. Something is going on inside of me. It's like there's a being in there who is jumping up and down, rejoicing. It's so funny because I don't even know why, what the subject is, if there is one. I told you things were strange for me, right? Not that I need to produce evidence, for heaven's sake, since every other paragraph seems to document it. So all I can say is be sure to read and or listen to this one from a centered space, be in heart and not in head with it. From heart, we can more easily read the energies involved. While poor head must rely on logic, heart has other ways to sense or read what's going on. Better ways, the way I see it. Okay, maybe nothing of substance will come through this journal. I guess I've got to drop that whole idea that something clear has to come through. I'm not getting anything clear enough to be useful to anyone's mind, and maybe that's the point. All of this that's going on with me has rather sternly almost forced me out of allegiance to logic and mind. It was hardest at first when I saw my outer identity or persona begin to crack and then crumble, and all I had believed in go tumbling down. It didn't take long, though, to realize that if I chose to hang on to any of that stuff, even though I once thought it was who I am, who I was, I would just go down with it. Into what? I guess into oblivion, into despair, depression, nothingness. Again, I don't know. the attack, if you will, and that's too strong a word, on my 3D outer identity was heavy-handed for sure. Like Pluto's heavy-duty reputation, being Lord of the Underworld and all of that, none of it was presented with options. Inescapable is an accurate word. So, coming to terms with that, well, it didn't take so very long. It was be crushed, go crazy, or just accept. I chose to accept. For a while, and it may cycle that way again, I guess I characterized it as being in the valley of the shadow of death. It was, for a time, definitely a dark night of the soul. And I'm talking over the last 5 years or so. 5, 6, 7. There were times when I was almost certain the body would not survive it, whether it was that, whatever it was that was transpiring. So heavy is a really apt word. Now, with that lovely hindsight that is so often useful, I look back now and see more clearly what was going on, what I couldn't see back then. All of that suffering and pain was not being felt by the real and true me, who I truly am, the divine identity. All of that was the dying throes of what I now call the false self, the outer persona. So in that way, it was a legitimate death. That one did not survive. Strange. Yet, with that death, there was the lifting of, well, I don't know. Things are less heavy now. It's like there was a dark cloud or a gray muffling blanket of energy that I didn't even know was there, but now that it's gone, I can see it. Something heavy was lifted. It is no more. Now, I want to say, when I'm talking about the death of the false self, the outer persona, that this is a process, for one thing, and tends to go by stages, layers, and levels. It's got to clear what's in front of it before it can go deeper. And the other thing I will say is that there's nothing wrong with 3D. And I believe that all of the masters have, and that we will have, I don't know what to call it, a personality. I mean, we still have and will have the human. And so sometimes people will criticize a guru who died of cancer, let's say. And they will use that death to invalidate all of his teachings. Obviously, he wasn't the one. He wasn't perfect, whatever. I find that to be judgmental and linear. I think the very best presentation I have found of this, now it's a big book, but it is available online at no cost, is the teachings of Nisargadatta. My favorite work of his is I Am That. And you will see he loses his temper regularly. He gets irritated with folks. He feels things. He feels emotions. He slips up. And people that have trouble taking this in and still thinking he's a guru and a master and a worthy spiritual teacher will ask him about it. And the way he explains it is that, yes, he still loses his temper, maybe says things he wish he didn't, but it used to be he felt that very deeply and he would get into that energy. He says now most often it comes and it goes. It doesn't stay long. It's easier and easier to stay in the vortex, to use the words of Abraham. It's easier and easier to note the energy and to lift yourself back up. So I'm not claiming a complete death of the false self, and I'm not thinking that such a thing would lead to any kind of outer 3D perfection. That kind of spiritual perfection is something we all have. We have it right now. It's nothing that needs to be earned, developed, learned, or any of that. It has to be accessed. That's who we are. And in that way, we're all equals. We're just playing different parts. Okay, boy, I really went out there with that. Okay, so that with that death, there was a lifting. There's a new sort of quiet freedom here where I am. Before, it was like I had less freedom, like being in mind was somehow mandatory. It took a couple of years of real effort, focused, working against that, to train myself to spend more time in heart, to develop the habit. It was like slogging through mud at times. Not always, but there were times. Now, there's a very natural heart presence that's pretty easy to maintain. In my last journal, I talked about that. You get a reading from your heart on whatever you're doing, whatever you're paying attention to, whatever video you're watching, whatever material you're reading. You get a reading from your heart. It will embrace you if what you're taking in is relevant, appropriate, uplifting, healthy, good for you, whatever. And it will make it harder for you to stay in heart if what you're viewing is not so useful to you. There are exceptions to everything. There are no generalities that work. So I won't say if you're watching war footage that you shouldn't be doing that, that that's horrible, that you're feeding war or whatever. Your heart might have drawn you to watch that so that you would be inspired to pray for those people. There are no generalities that are useful. That's mind stuff. And heart is wisdom. I don't know. Okay. So where am I? There's an increased clarity too now. Don't laugh. I'm talking about what I'm sensing here, not about a mental clarity. You know, I don't yet have that. Though if I ever need it, I'm sure it will appear. Funny that. And also strange. Does one ever get used to such stuff? Perhaps, but at this point, I think not. Being in the now here doesn't include the past. And when you say get used to, that means you develop a comfort zone and you're used to something and it harmonizes with the past. Being in the now, you lose the past. One of the amazing and strange things about it is how everything is always so new, so fresh somehow. To get used to something, I guess, means to carry the past around with you, which I definitely don't, as many of you well know. I embarrass myself that way a lot, but I've grown able to kind of enjoy a laugh and be jolly about it and go on. It is no big deal. Okay, so I won't win any Genius Awards these days. Do I care? not. It's all so very wonderful, I hardly know what to do with myself at times. There are other times, of course. Now, do realize that this is that joy talking here. I have plenty of times that challenge me physically, emotionally, that sort of thing. You know, I'm fond of saying I'm just a regular Jane. Yet it's also different somehow. I don't know, maybe I'm sharing this too soon. It's so unclear. Just stay in heart with it. I know there's something there. I can feel it. One thing I know, and if you don't already, you will too after listening to this audiobook in the link, is that heaven is right here where we are. So is 5 and 6D and all of the rest of that, all right here, now here. What changes, my friends, is us, not the place where we are, not the externals at all, just us. It's all so bizarre, but heaven is right here, right now. And see, this was written the 26th, and I guess I did a more recent journal on that very thing. What's required is a major shift in our vision, in our ability to see from heart instead of from mind. We've been taught all wrong, taught how to perceive our world in ways that lock us out of what is already here for us. We've been taught this whole thing of unworthiness, original sin, all of that rot. I'm sure that's how many instantaneous miracles are about to happen. It's all right now, here, always. Yet, by our beliefs, we've been trapped in a false mental view of the world. Well, science is certainly locked into that, except kind of for quantum physics, which pokes at the edges of that box that they're in. Nothing at all is what we think it is, up to and including the self that we're so sure we are. Not until we are willing to lay that false self down, allow it to die. Not until then will we be able to see what is already here for us. So very strange. It's so huge, too. So very huge, this great false pseudo-reality we've been somehow woven into. We've been taught to accept, to consider it normal. Our acceptance is mandatory, of course. We're all truly kings and queens, royalty of the light, and we do have precious treasures like free will, treasures that require respect. So we had to give our agreement to the whole scene, or it wouldn't have applied to us. We are that strong, that powerful. So we assented to it. We agreed. We let them lay out our reality for us like that, and we bought into it. I guess we said, what the heck, why not? Since deep within, we always knew we were these powerful sovereigns and that cannot be taken away from us. We cannot truly be hurt. We're made to feel massively uncomfortable, sure, but not truly hurt. That one whom we all are, that one can never even be touched, never harmed. Anyway, we're waking up from the daze now. Yeah, I know from what I'm reporting here that I sound kind of like I'm still in a daze, but it's different. It's an awakening daze, not a deadened, somnambulant one. And if you're in heart, you'll be tuning into this. They're vastly different. Besides, I know quite a lot of you must be with me in this, at least to some extent or another. Heck, I may be lagging behind a lot of you for all I know, and that would be fine too. Oh my God, it's like everything is just fine. Deeply so. So very strange, but it just doesn't matter what happens or what doesn't. It's all so beautifully, gloriously fine. Who'd have thunk it, huh? Surely not me. One of the things we lay aside with the mind, and something that almost seems to be a part of mind, and it may be, is time. Don't know that I can explain this, but some things seem to be happening in ways that violate time. I wish I could explain the very soft focus I have that's been working for me, and it's easier when there's no clocks on the wall and no Monday job and that kind of thing, you know, nothing pulling and tugging at me. Then you'd see why my explanations have to be sort of soft or out of focus too, out of 3D focus. Mind wants to grab onto things, to hold them tightly, to master them, to know things, in other words. And that's fine, nothing wrong with that. But when I set mind aside, not put it away, just make it relatively far less important, I lost that crisp, clear 3D focus. It went with mind. It relied too much on time and on sequences of events and I don't know what. It just didn't work in this new territory for me. Oh, I'm going to put another thing with this. Let me make myself a note. I'm going to give you a little thing that you can look at. And you know those pictures we used to look at that were out of focus? You had to put your eyes kind of out of focus. It looked like just a bunch of blobs. But if you put your eyes out of focus, it would give you like a 3D image. I'm going to give you something resembling that. It's interesting. Okay. Let's see. I lost that crisp, clear 3D focus. It went with mind. It relied too much on time and the sequence of events, and it didn't work in this new territory. I'm finding that whenever mind and thought pop up, if I just let it go without even really looking at it, going straight back into heart, that this works really well. Now, obviously not when you're trying to do a mind-centric task like balance your checkbook. You know, I'm talking about when you've got time set aside that you could just be. It enables me to stay in heart much more consistently. So now I view mind with this really soft or fuzzy focus, not really paying it much attention. Make sense? Thus, I don't really ever let mind fully engage, grasp onto what it wants to view through its particular lens or perspective, preferring to view all things from heart. Heart's view is far more a sensing sort of thing, and it's able to think. It has its own neurons, you know. You tell the import, the relevance of things by the feel of them, pretty much. You don't give it the least bit of thought. And that will be strange for most of us. But after some time, you do get the hang of it. That is, if this is your cup of tea. And I don't suppose it will be for everyone. And it takes some time getting here too. You've got to let quite a lot of things go along the way to this. Things that got in the way of this all along. Things that were blocking us from perceiving it. Things like thinking you know anything. It's a big one to let go, isn't it? So you wind up with a much softer, a far more loving focus on life, on all of it. You actually may find yourself falling in love with life, with every bit of it, every one, everything. It's bizarre, but there you go. What can I say? You know you don't know anything, so that brings on a nice crop of humility, which is a very softening thing in itself. You keep realizing the beauty of whatever it is you happen to gaze upon. You keep getting slain by that, bowled over by it, the awesomeness of it, the pure, divine genius of it. You get lost in things frequently, lost in admiring, lost in grateful appreciation. Oh, well, I suppose I've already dug myself in rather deeply here. As usual, it didn't turn out to be anything like what thought might have imagined it would be, this journal. Am I surprised? Kinda. I've written thousands of these things, but I gave up on the logic that said there should be a certain, if not sameness, then at least a certain consistency in them. Don't know about you, but I don't find much of that. But I don't need it, you see. I don't need to make sense to anyone's mind. And yeah, I know that's throwing caution to the winds, but that's okay too. Why not? Have I got so very much to lose by this? When you truly can't be hurt or harmed, the real you, well, you get braver. Much braver, I guess. You get froggy. Heck, I don't know. I'm just having fun. Namaste. Aspect of Uranus to Pluto and other equally challenging things in my own chart, it's truly intense. With great depth of honesty, I can say I truly don't know who I am. And whoever I think it is, it's probably going out the window tomorrow. I'm having to find something deeper than identity on which to rely. It's a very strange ride. Just now, though, I am in the grip of a strange, heart-centric joy that is very uplifting. It is not like what I've been used to calling that divine joy with the capital J and teachings of the Masters of the Far East into an audiobook. I enjoy her work, so be sure to open the main written journal for that link. It's a precious one. As it turns out, this book will rejuvenate the faith of many Christians, for these Eastern masters actually taught their lessons in terms of Christianity. The books are really great, but perhaps I'll ad-lib about that when I record this. My heart is going elsewhere with me here. Perhaps the only way I have of sharing the perceived depth of the identity changes I am going through is to share that transiting Pluto sits and is parked precisely on my natal sun, and it retrogrades back and forth over that 9 degrees Capricorn. Now the sun in our chart represents our actual identity, as opposed to the ascendant, which is about how we present to the world, what people see when they look at us, not who we really are. when we add in the long-lasting square. Okay, another journal. This one is from 826, and the Mayan day was 5 Lamont, which is star, rabbit, or Venus. Now go figure what those three have in common. I am suddenly filled with a quiet joy and a very strong desire to open this journal. Let's see what's behind this, for I do not know. For one thing, I'll be sharing a link to one of Grace Butler's playlists on YouTube, where she turns book 1 of Life that I find ever present in heart. It's somehow quieter, smaller, yet more intense. Don't know what it's about, just that it's different from what I've encountered before. Yes, I am in process of losing everything. Now, I don't say that about possessions or things physical, but those things are transitory anyway. I mean, even the body is a transitory thing. They mean far less to me than the internal things I'm having to let go of. I just don't live that much on 3D. So my values have moved on with me into spiritual things, and I know